all the way on the other side of him is Caitlin Walsh-Shelton. And Caitlin's the Senior Policy Advisor for the Institute for Women's Health. And prior to that, she was in the Trump administration at the Health and Human Services Department, and specifically in their Center for Faith and Opportunity Investment, as well as in the Office of Global Affairs. So she wore a couple of hats, so we'll talk a little bit about that. She went to a school called Yale. You might have heard of them. They don't have the best football team, but it's a pretty good school. And she lives in DC with her husband John and twin boys. So this is a bit of a vacation for you, I think.
Well, yes, it is. And I also went to Union University for undergrad, which I wanted to say because I have a professor in the back of the room. He said there were some students in the audience. So.
All right. Go Union. What's the mascot for Union?
Bulldogs.
Bulldogs. All right. Same as Yale.
Same, yeah.
All right. All right. That narrows it down. To her left, in the seating arrangement, but maybe not politically, Andrew Gerns is Executive Director of the U.S. Senate Pro-Life Caucus. So Andrew's been on the Hill for a couple of years in this leadership position, so we're really looking forward to his thoughts. Steve Daines of Montana, the senator, is the leader of that caucus, so Andrew works closely with him. Shout out right there. He has his bachelor and his master's degrees, both from Johns Hopkins, lives in Virginia with his wife Claire and 2 sons. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us. To my left, Kyle Bunnell, our Senior Job Bank Manager at Heritage Foundation. Kyle is sort of like all roads lead to Kyle Bunnell, or from Kyle Bunnell. He places conservatives in jobs on Capitol Hill, in state governments, and across the country, nonprofit organizations and everything else. But he's really our key heritage operator and colleague in this space. He's an Ohio native, went to Miami University. So, with that, let's talk. We want to talk about jobs in the pro-life movement, and that can be a really broad topic and both narrow, to think about the jobs you can have in life and the career jungle gym, right? Generations ago, it was called a career ladder. Now it's sort of a career jungle gym. But we're here to talk about, being pro-life and being proud to be pro-life and the journey that you take in your professional career. But Kyle, tell us a little bit about the wide variety of jobs, specifically in the pro-life movement. What are the different skill sets that people look for? What are maybe some of the majors that are key feeders into that pipeline?
Thank you, Andy, and thanks to all of you for being here. This is always a fun question for me. So I know, show of hands, how many of you are maybe in high school or college? All of you. So I know when you're in high school and college, it's hard to really grasp how many different types of jobs there are. You see people on like Fox News as commentators, you see members of Congress, maybe analysts, media figures, and you don't really see how many different types of jobs there are behind the scenes, kind of making pro-life policy wins happen. And people in college often think that their college major is like a career straitjacket. Like, I'm a applied major, I have to do this, or I'm an accountant, I can never work in the policy world. And nothing could really be further from the truth. It takes a real wide range of skills and majors and disciplines to really make things happen. The pro-life movement really needs good attorneys, you need good judges, you need good litigators, nonprofits need good general counsels, and members of Congress, presidents, governors need good legislative counsel to actually draft good legislation. So if any of you are interested in law school, there's a way to really merge that with the pro-life movement. We need good communicators. Andy knows that one pretty well. Where he spent both his career. We need people who are good messengers, good writers, marketers, graphic designers, video producers. We need people with a business background and skill set. Like nonprofits need good accountants, they need good HR people, recruiters. IT is pretty important. We were just talking about this. If you want to protect the pro-life cause, you better have good cybersecurity and IT people you can trust. And you can build good websites. If you're interested in IT, there's a career path there for you with conservative groups. These groups also need people who are organized. There's a high demand for people who can get things done. Schedulers, administrative assistants, program coordinators to coordinate internships, training programs, alumni relations. There's also a pretty high demand for people who can do fundraising. I publish a list twice a week of conservative pro-life job openings. On any given day, a third to half the job openings are in fundraising, because nonprofits need to raise money to keep the doors open and keep advancing the cause. So if you want to career pretty quickly, I see fundraiser nodding in front of the room. If you want to get good career prospects, get into fundraising, and you get a job quickly and advance quickly. A quick pitch for fundraising jobs. They're kind of diverse. So fundraising is a big career umbrella. Within that, you have people who are more introverted, who might like data analysis to manage a large database of donors. You have writers who spend their time writing really persuasive grants. You have people who do digital marketing for online fundraising. And if you're an extrovert who loves to travel and meet people, nonprofits have major gift solicitors, officers. You manage a portfolio of high wealth supporters and manage relationships. So it's really just a wide range of career paths within the pro-life movement. The nonprofits need them, so the Hill, so do governors, executive branch, really everywhere. There's some career paths where you really got to know your stuff. You really can't fake being a good accountant or IT person. So some things we will need specific major or training. But for so many jobs, if you are really passionate and can really make things happen, a lot of what you need to learn, you can learn on the fly in your first job. If you're really dedicated and you have a good track record of being productive. So I encourage you to be really open-minded about what your career path might look like in the pro-life world. And keep open-minded in mid-career about what that can look like, because we need all kinds of talents and all kinds of majors.
Great, thank you, Kyle. And so as Kyle painted this very broad picture and touched on all these different career tracks, we're going to go in sort of order of constitutional priority and start with the legislative branch and ask Andrew a question. Andrew, you're leading this caucus on Capitol Hill. Tell us what the day-to-day is like. What are the skill sets that you look for on Capitol Hill?
Absolutely, and first of all, it's just so great to be at the Students for Life conference. I started my job in the pro-life movement effectively on campus like many of you guys, and that passion that you guys are bringing is exactly what we need on Capitol Hill today. So this is just a recruitment pitch for all of you. Please come work in Washington. We need you. We need more of you. But so on my day-to-day, so what does this look like for me, Executive Director of the Pro-Life Caucus? For me, this is my dream job. As somebody who's just, the pro-life issue is just at this level of, there's no other issue that can compare. And if you feel similarly, the Pro-Life Caucus, I think, is a great place to be. So the day-to-day, I'm reading through bills, I'm working with different offices that want to advance pro-life legislation, trying to help think through strategically, how are we exhausting every opportunity at the federal level to encourage the executive branch to be accountable. So looking at things like the Hyde Amendment, making sure we're not funding abortions in various agencies. And some of it's going through the nitty-gritties of policy. So if you do get a policy job on the Hill or otherwise, there's lots of different avenues within the life movement that Kayla can get into as well. There's foreign aspect, there's domestic, and all of these different pieces. The pro-life issue has a way of coming up in almost every single piece of legislation. There's exceptions, but everything from a banking bill, it can be, there was a question of, well, what happens if a pro-lifer goes bankrupt when they're being sued outside an abortion clinic? It could be a foreign aid bill, well, what are we funding abortions? It's amazing where the pro-life issue will pop up and blow up bills. So often when people get a call from me on the Hill, they turn white if they're trying to get their bill done, because they're so great. Now we have if it's a pro-life blow up, that's a bad sign.
I just think it's interesting that Andrew's telling us there's people that actually read legislation before they vote on it.
That's true.
I didn't know that still happened.
Staff read it.
Okay, all right. All right. In staff we trust, right? So, Caitlin, thank you for your service in the executive branch. And, in that time, you had, kind of a very broad portfolio. You wore multiple hats, but tell us about the pro-life work that you encountered, whether it was sort of coming at you and crossing your desk, or if it was something that you were initiating and leading. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks. So I started a short career in the House of Representatives after I graduated from graduate school. I studied English and ethics, so very weird degrees to then go into politics. But very useful because they did teach me how to write, and writing is definitely a skill set that is very needed. So do good work in your degrees, learn how to write. So I did a short stint in the House of Representatives, hated every second of it, and realized it was not for me. And so I had an opportunity to go work in the executive branch in the Center for Faith and Opportunity Initiatives. And that was a little bit more fun. My first task on the job was getting to draft that year's Proclamation on Life for the White House, which was, when my boss asked me if I would take a stab at it, I was like, are you serious? I get paid to do this? Yes, I will do that. So that was really fun. But then the bulk of my work at the Department of Health and Human Services was in the Office of Global Affairs, working on international pro-life issues. And I had no idea before this job opening came up that, I mean, I knew that life issues existed in other countries, but because the debate in the US is just so polarized and loud, I never really considered the life issue abroad as well, including the United States stance on the life issue abroad. And so I got a chance to work on international pro-life policy and helped craft the United States position on abortion abroad. You might have heard of the Mexico City policy. It says that US dollars can't fund abortions abroad. Well, my work with my boss, Valerie Huber, who is brilliant and strategic and amazing, was to basically expand the Mexico City policy. And it was what we called the Protecting Life and Global Health Policy Initiative. And so that's what we did during my time in the Office of Global Affairs, and that's what we're continuing to do actually from the nonprofit space now that we unfortunately do not have a pro-life presidential administration. So.
Thank you. You know, what's interesting in my experience, I was a speechwriter in the Bush administration, and as Caitlin's talking about the importance of writing and crafting arguments, and both Andrew and Kyle have talked about that too, there is a lot about persuasive language and a lot about consistent messaging that's so important, not only for talking to constituents, not only for moving things across an administration and moving policy, but also how you represent the country to the rest of the world. I mean, you can't underestimate what Caitlin's talking about here, and the role that staff plays in that is key and instrumental. And before we go too much further along, we will take questions from everybody, so be thinking about questions and all that. But Andrew, I want to go back to you. You know, we've got this sea of beautiful shining faces here smiling and probably graduating at some point soon, and Andrew's hiring. Tell us, you know, what are you looking for, right? What are the things that you look out at this crowd and you say, you know, I've got 2 or 3 positions that are open. These are the kind of people that I want. Tell us about that.
That's a great question, and not too long ago I was in your shoes asking the same one. So none of us here who you see in the jobs that you might really want wasn't exactly in your shoes. So one thing to first know is people in Washington who have jobs you like want to help you. So a great thing I would look for on the hiring side is, have they had some experience or worked or met or had some meetings with people who work in that space who I trust, who could speak to your character, speak to your work ethic, speak to your track record. And ultimately, you know, you can build that up through doing things like when you're doing an internship in Washington is an incredible way to start. Summers are a great way to do it, but there's even more opportunities in the spring or fall if you can get that, since there's less competition. So that's a great way to get your foot in the door. Many of the internships are paid on the Hill now, so that's an improvement from when I was there, for many of us. But it's a good thing, because ultimately we want to have access for people of all backgrounds to be able to basically prove what they can do. So I'd have to encourage you to be confident in yourself in that regard, to apply for internships at congressional offices or committees, or even better, if you want to get some policy experience. At a typical Hill office, you'll probably be answering phones or working on memos for other staff, but that's your way to get started. Also important skills, writing. You can learn how to write concisely, write effectively. You can do anything, really. That's how you can change the world, is by thinking clearly, writing, and as a member of Congress, they don't have a lot of time. So if you can put what they need to know in a concise way where they can see pros and cons and help guide decision making. You're not an elected member of Congress as a staffer. Some of them that's a surprise, especially ones who have maybe a pro-abortion view and might work for a pro-life member. They exist. We need to replace them. Part of my mission here. So if you can write, show you can write, that's a great way to get your foot in the door.
Yeah, that's a great point. Clear writing is a sign of clear thinking. It's really, really important to internalize that and think about that. So Caitlin, to you, and then back to Andrew, and then Kyle comment on this, but Andrew touched on this. You know, there are pro-choice people, staffers working for pro-life members, right? There are a lot of jobs out there. This happens, right? And in administrations, you get a sea of different people in those roles. You know, Caitlin, maybe talk a little bit about, you know, how does the scope of administration work touch, political appointees versus career staff and all this? How do you get more pro-life people into different positions?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, something I really wanted to touch on, because a lot of people.
That's a point for me.
A lot of people don't understand, and I had no idea before I started working in the executive branch, the makeup of the different agencies. So the agencies are run by political appointees who are appointed by the White House, by the president. But then you have your staffers who are there every day, day in, day out, not affected by elections at all. Hard to fire, also really hard to hire. They're called the federal or career staff. So they're there regardless of which administration is in power. Then you also have contractors. Contractors are kind of a workaround to make it easier to hire and hire who you want. That's actually the role that I was in whenever I was in the Trump administration. So yeah, it becomes really difficult when you're working in a pro-life administration with pro-life, ideally pro-life political appointees. Not all of them are. But it's really hard whenever you have a staff that is not pro-life. And you have to learn how to navigate working with people who have different views from you, but also encouraging them to do the work that the political appointees actually would like for them to do. So it is difficult to work within our bureaucratic system, but it's all the more reason why we need pro-life staffers, not just political appointees, but we need pro-life contractors and we need pro-life federal career staff in the executive agencies, because like I said, they are hard to fire, so they stay there most of the time for their entire lives. Yeah.
The administrative state. Kyle, maybe you'd speak to that, the idea that, if your early career, working on the Hill, even working in administration, and then sort of pursuing different career paths afterwards, but having that experience, understanding how that process works, how do you see that? When most of the resumes that come into you, job seekers that come into you, how do you think about the arc of their career and working on the Hill, working in administration, working on a specific issue across the movement? Talk a little bit about that.
Happy to. I think it's really helpful to get that experience early in your career. We were talking about this just outside the doors, that the young staffers on the Hill and in administration tend to get outside responsibilities at a really young age. You'll wonder, why is someone who's 23 running this department? So a lot of these jobs are kind of high pressure, high demand. That just means you learn a lot of things a lot faster than you would otherwise. So you might wind up working 5 years in two, but it tends to just accelerate your career growth. Usually people who work for a president as a political appointee or in a Hill office, they tend to be in high demand. I'm sure you both got lots of emails and meet tons of people because everybody wants their attention. So by being the person in those jobs, you wind up meeting a lot of people on the outside and build a really robust network and figuratively speaking, your Rolodex, it makes you a lot more marketable to kind of the nonprofit employers who might hire you for a job with more reasonable work-life balance. So it's a good place to start. Also, when you're younger in these jobs, there tends to be a lot of mobility. One day you might be doing scheduling, next day you could be doing press, or a few months later it could be policy. So there's a lot of mobility to kind of move around laterally, I think on the Hill, and especially in a president's administration. So you can try out a lot of different types of jobs and figure out what you want to hone in on, once your time on the Hill or with the president ends. But one note of caution for the executive branch and hiring, it usually entails going for security clearance, so keep that in mind now. Usually it requires a lot of paperwork, tracking, who all your foreign contacts are, where you've lived and when, and probably hundreds of pages of that information. So if you go online and look at the, I think it's SF-86, give you a sense of what kind of paperwork you'll need to do when you go for security clearance, what you need for these jobs. So keep that in mind now during college. Don't do anything too questionable that might jeopardize your clearance someday.
I can echo that. When I was an appointee in the Bush administration, and you fill out all these forms and you go through that process, it was after my wife had already started working as a forensic scientist for the FBI, and that process was much more detailed, much more scrutinized. But the questions that they ask and the people that they find throughout your background and your life to talk to ask those questions we should encourage that. We want good people to serve, and we want people that will never be compromised or not be compromised to serve. But it is something that's very real. And so behave yourselves, because you want to be able to have all the job opportunities that are in front of you. So we're happy to, raise your hand if you have a question. We got one over here. I think there's a microphone somewhere, but if we don't have it, I will.
I can talk loud until somebody hands me one.
All right. Oh.
So,
Oh.
I have to take yours,
Oh,
and you
okay.
guys can share. I'm so
Oh, it's okay. Or do you want me to walk around and be like,
It doesn't
like that?
stop.
All right, we got a
Whatever you
question
want.
from Alex.
Thank you, sir. Much appreciated. So, thank you all very much for speaking, all of you. My question is on something that maybe you taught. I came a little late. Maybe you mentioned it or not, but it's on the question of networking. And so there's, like obvious generic flyby DC advice, like you guys should really network. And I wanted to take it a little bit deeper. What are some habits of a really good networker? Not just someone who goes out for coffee every now and then, but someone who develops relationships with future employers. What are some things that, of the people you advise, some habits that they have you've noticed are extremely effective? How frequently do they do such habits? What are the kind of people that you target for networking, and how do you select those people to target for networking? What is the best means of targeting them? Is it going for coffees? Is it doing phone calls? Is it Zoom? Am I giving you too many different bunny trails to go down?
I'm happy to tackle one of those right off the bat that comes to mind. I'll let everybody else jump in. The best thing to do to be a good networker is, I think, is to follow through. When people give you advice on maybe how to format your resume, or who to talk to next, or what job to apply to, or that type of thing, if you take their advice and they know you take their advice, they'll be a lot more eager to help you moving forward if they know you're actually listening, not just trying to use them for your next connection. So follow through by taking all of their advice to heart and showing them that you're doing that. After you do networking events, make sure you email people you talk to and thank them for their time. It's kind of surprising how many people don't do that. If someone gives you a card and says, let's talk, follow through quickly. If you do all that, you're probably in the top 10% of people networking at this point.
Yeah, I would just say some advice that was given to me was to, whenever you reach out to someone to get coffee, lead the conversation. You're kind of in charge, and it's a little bit awkward, especially if you are reaching out to someone who's in a position that's higher than you, maybe much older than you. You feel kind of weird being the person to lead the conversation, but if you're reaching out to them to get their advice, have some questions prepared and be ready to ask those questions. Otherwise, it just is kind of awkward sitting there staring at someone with a cup of coffee. And then the other advice is, people would tell me whenever you get coffee or network with someone, at the end, always ask them if they have advice for who you should talk to next. So it's always a constant stream of people that you have to talk to. And ask them if they can make the introduction, because it's always more helpful if, rather than cold emailing someone, if someone else can introduce you to someone.
Can't improve on that.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Aline. I'm here through MIT. As we're talking about careers in the pro-life movement, what can an engineer do in a career to help the pro-life movement?
Leave it to the MIT student to ask a really difficult question.
My hunch is that there would be some type of job. I know you work in Department of Commerce, I believe. There might be some type of job there, maybe commerce, if there's overlap between engineering and public policy where you could probably contribute. I know a lot of different states will have really kind of niche, boards and commissions where there might be a board of engineer professionals where you can serve on a professional board or commission and steer policy that way. I think you can find a few kind of niche jobs here and there that would incorporate that background. Beyond that, you can also maybe not be paid, but there are a lot of cool ways you can contribute to the cause by joining, going for city council, school board, really any kind of association the left tries to take over. So whether it's a homeowner association or PTA or anything, wherever you can find a way to kind of get involved outside your day-to-day work is helpful. Engineers or anybody who does STEM is taking even more seriously as a professional because it's a really hard career path. But I think you are more compelling as a candidate for those types of leadership roles.
What kind of engineering? What are you focused on?
Mechanical, chemical, and biological.
Okay, that didn't narrow it down for me. Mechanical. Chemical and biological, is that what you said?
And mechanical.
Mechanical, okay. I would just say a couple things. I think, I mean, that kind of a career track is, you do have a lot of options, and obviously there's a lot of private sector options and things like that. There are in, political positions and executive branch positions, especially, we talk about the administrative state, we talk about the bureaucracy writ large. There are wonderful and brilliant men and women that do work for the U.S. government, at NASA, at NIST, patent and trademark roles and things like that. Brilliant people that do great work to advance science and technology and engineering and all that. So those roles do exist. What I would say is, with that skill set, when you get there, how do you apply being pro-life in that environment? So it's probably finding other people that are like that, creating a pro-life employee organization, things like that. In the private sector, you can create employee resource groups around different issues. Corporations are loving that right now because they're trying to be open to those ideas. Obviously, there are cultural pressures to comply with, we might say, are more lefty agenda items. But when you have that skill set, one of the things that you can do is leverage that brilliance to create the change in the environment that you're in. So I hope that helps answer the question a little bit. Another question, we got a lot there. I'll work my way back.
My name is Mariana, and I'm actually part of the Young Professional Arm of Students for Life. And so I was wondering, like, besides, being part of this young professional organization, what are ways that someone who's maybe not working in the pro-life movement, who's maybe had another career track, how can they sort of, like, come into something like this? Like from other sort of tracks or jobs?
I think you focus on transferable skills and experiences. A lot of times, job descriptions are like open book tests for job interviews. Figure out what are the day-to-day job responsibilities, have I done this in a different job, and how they translate one to the other. So I think what you probably want to do is, if you go to these types of jobs, talk about how you work in different sector industry, translates to the day-to-day work of the pro-life organization, and then make that case really detailed in a detailed way in a cover letter and a job interview. Connect the dots. So what you want to do is kind of pair your transferable skills and experiences, with your passion for being pro-life. And on your resume for a job like that, you should put that you went to the 2022 Pro-Life Summit. You brand yourself conservative when you apply and talk about your transferable experiences. And I've seen that work, a lot of times for a lot of jobs. So I think there is a pretty clear path to do that. If you just find the jobs that are most similar to the ones you've done in a different industry.
My name's Travis. I graduate college here in May. What's your advice for someone who's looking to navigate the job application here in the more near future, and then for someone who's not 4 years away from looking for a pro-life job, but maybe 4 months?
I would say this is what I did. I, in my final semester of graduate school, was applying to jobs. So I was far away. I was in Connecticut, but I was applying to jobs in DC. I was actually following Kyle's job bank list. I didn't know Kyle yet, but you should definitely sign up for the job banks through Heritage because they're very helpful. But there are a few different listservs that you can get on if you want to work on the Hill in the legislative branch. There's USA.gov, is that the site, for federal jobs. Some advice that I would give is learn about contracting companies that contract with the US government, get your resume into their system, and they might reach out to you for positions that they have available. It's a lot easier to get hired as a contractor than it is to become a federal employee, because a lot of the application process for becoming a federal employee is contingent upon algorithms that are judging your word choice in your resume, which is absolutely ridiculous. But and then another thing is just apply broadly. I probably applied to 50 or 60 or more jobs, didn't hear back from very many, but then I moved to DC without a job and went around office to office and handed my resume out and ended up getting 3 job offers that way. So also recommend that.
And I would add that it helps to both apply formally and look at publicized jobs and also work on the jobs that aren't publicized. So you want to apply thoroughly and diligently, and also, as cliche as it sounds, network. So the jobs you see online, apply for them, write thoughtful cover letters and tailor your resume to the job. But also people you've worked with in the past, former supervisors, peers, people you've networked with. As you're graduating, you want to reach out to them and update them, say, graduating in 3 months, looking for a job doing this and that in this region, attach my resume, appreciate all your help in the past and any insight or ideas you have, I'd be most grateful for. Make sure everyone you know in your network knows you're looking for a job and what kind of job. I mean, when you're graduating college, you don't have to be coy about it. I mean, everyone knows you're going to look for a job, so make sure everybody knows about it. So as they hear about jobs that don't get publicized, they'll have you top of mind in your resume in their inbox, so they can plug you into jobs on the Hill or executive branch that might not wind up on my jobs list.
All right, another question.
Hi, thank you. So my question is regarding people who don't want to go to college or in the military. Does the pro-life movement look for experience in the trades, 5 years as a plumber, former Marine instead of a college major because of out of a concern of college debt? Is that something that exists currently, or is it mostly college majors that you look for?
There's definitely high regard for military, especially in the executive branch. It's actually built into the requirements for hiring for federal positions that military get the first pass, which I think is amazing. But there are also usually requirements for bachelor's degrees or master's degrees. I'm not sure if positions exist without those requirements, but I definitely know there's a high regard for military.
I'm seeing more and more positions say, ask for a 4-year degree, then with a caveat or equivalent, skills and experience, which I think military would certainly apply. So I don't think it would be that big of an impediment. I think employers are more and more open to not hiring people with a 4-year degree as they see what's becoming of higher education. So I think you can't find a lot of jobs where you could jump in right away and work full time, especially if there's a pro-life group hiring for a regional coordinator. I think as of a month or so ago, Students for Life is hiring for that type of a role. So I think you can find a job pretty quickly where you can apply your experience and get started and advance pretty quickly.
My question is just what role does being pro-life, have in the workforce? Obviously it's significant to be pro-life, but for example, working in Capitol Hill, I'm sure you, influence certain laws or bills that are being passed, but what specifically does it allow you to do that's different, I guess?
I can jump in on this one. So being pro-life, as I think you pointed out here, it's a worldview, it's a concrete set of principles. And when you're in politics, it's messy. And often there are heated discussions. Believe it or not, everyone in the pro-life movement doesn't always agree about everything. That might come as a shock to some, but so sometimes you might be in the office where you have to be the conscience. You have to be the one to stand up, sometimes even to your boss or an elected member, and say, boss, this is a really bad idea. Or, I appreciate the point, this other staffer was making, who shouldn't have been employed here. And instead, you should consider the principles at play here. So sometimes you have to just remind people of these principles, and sometimes it's about thinking creatively outside the box and how your principles can inspire a new approach. For example, we're all talking about the child tax credit this week, and next week we'll be introducing a bill to extend the child tax credit to unborn children, for example. There are ways we can look at creative ways to adapt policy to reflect pro-life values in different ways, and I think that's ways you as a pro-life staffer, you guys can bring a political vision, a renewed force for some of the staleness we get with the political system here in DC, where there's just certain expectations of the way things should be done. Well, those don't always have to be the case, and you as bringing in your pro-life values, can bring in some fresh blood, can really make a difference over time.
Two things. One, if I talk from back here, everybody has to turn around, which is kind of funny. The other, just to answer your question about, other jobs, in my corporate life, one of the teams that reported to me was responsible for charitable giving for our corporation, and that was the dispensing of what started out as about $30 million a year. We grew it up to about $75 million a year. But one of the things that I said was that we want to give to organizations that support Planned Parenthood and other things like that. That required me to not only think clearly, write clearly, communicate clearly and consistently, that was gonna be something that I took personally and seriously and convey that across the organization. It's not the easiest thing to do in a large corporation, but it required other people to then push back on me, and then you have a conversation of what is the role of the corporation, why would we take that position? And you can get to clarity, and then obviously, in my case, I was successful in steering a lot of that. Other people that I worked with at other corporations, less so. But you do have to, understand your value system and how you want to communicate that. So if you choose to work not in politics directly, but in a different career in the private sector, find those avenues of influence, find ways to steer that. And I would say, many large companies have employee matching gift programs. You can go around and you can say to all your employees, I'm going to give to this organization, a crisis pregnancy center. I would encourage you all to give to this, within the bounds of whatever would be good employee behavior with your colleagues, of course, but try to compel people to volunteer their time and their efforts towards something that you care about. And just like, Mike Pence and even our president, Kevin Roberts, said this morning, courage is contagious, and you cause people to think about what they believe in. You'd be amazed how many people's minds you can change.
Hi, my question is, what can students do still in high school involved in debate and speech do to kind of get a foot in the door for jobs in policy or related to government?
Yeah, I think a lot of, actually you mentioned speech and debate. I think that's great. I have a lot of friends in DC who participated in speech and debate. SGA, what's it called? The Model UN. Model UN is another opportunity that's really neat. I didn't participate in any of those things because I thought that I was going to be a creative writer. Yeah, I really don't know how I've ended up here, but yeah, those are great things to be involved in, but also just be involved, like be a high school student, play sports and be in plays and have fun, take your schoolwork seriously. You don't have to be career focused right now.
I would say a lot of opportunities will come through your involvement with campus groups, like Students for Life. You start off as an active chapter member, and then from there, someone's going to want you to be their volunteer. From there, they want you to be their paid intern. So you'll probably be starting off volunteering somewhere in some capacity in a pro-life cause, even in high school, and people just kind of build on each other. You become, through campus involvement, you become a known presence. Then from there, you become, a trusted volunteer. Then you become a trusted intern, and eventually, full-time hire. A lot of hiring happens, through community. People like to hire people they know and trust. So when you're very active, especially early on, you meet a lot of people, you build a large network, and you become the kind of person that people want to hire someday. So I think it does help to be very active in these types of campus groups. When you're in college, go do internships. Try them out. I think internships at the core are essentially job interviews. You have a 3-month interview where you make a hopefully a good impression, and people like to turn back to their interns when they make hires. I know, I'm sure you see on the Hill all the time, most staff assistants tend to be recent interns in the office. Heritage, a good chunk of our entry-level staff are former interns. So go do internships to kind of get your foot in the door somewhere and figure out what types of job industries you like and which ones you don't. So you kind of narrow down your focus as you get ready to graduate college in a few years.
I work at a Catholic graduate school of psychology and counseling. I just want to let everybody know that there's a great field out there for pro-life mental health professionals. We have over 500 students, and our graduates, there's much more demand for our graduates than we can fill. They work in clinics, they work in dioceses, they work in schools, they deal with women who are post-abortive, all kinds of situations. Men and women who have been abused. There's a great need for pro-life Christian psychologists, mental health professionals, therapists. If anybody has any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you very much. We've got about 5 minutes left, so I definitely 2 questions if this, okay. And then, so we'll keep our questions short, keep our answers tight.
Hi,
I was just wondering if you're hiring for an internship or an entry-level position where the person might not have exact experience for the job, like none of your applicants may have it, what's something that you can see on their resume that might put them one step ahead, whether that's involvement with the student organization or some other kind of job or anything like that? What exactly would you be looking for there? Thank you.
I think for me, it's some kind of involvement in a pro-life organization, even attending this conference, like I think Kyle said. I also always tailor my resume to the specific job or internship that I'm applying for. So I can include the exact things that I've done in the past that would maybe appeal to my future employer. And so I definitely think that, one, apply even if you don't think you have the necessary qualifications for the job. But if you're interested in it and passionate about it, go ahead and apply, and then also tailor your resume to that specific position.
And to build on that, I would say also pay really close attention to your resume formatting and if you're doing an application, the way you write your answers to essay questions. Those kind of become your writing samples, and as you probably heard a few times already, your writing is really important to have a missing skill in the kind of entry-level workforce. So write really carefully, pay attention to your resume formatting, and do brand yourself on your resume. You know, all of your involvement with conferences, campus groups, make sure that's really prominent on your resume. I wouldn't worry too much about your experience at this point. Nobody expects interns and entry-level hires to come in with a lot of experience. That's kind of why you're going for the internship. But it could be helpful to add a few skills along the way that are helpful. Beyond writing, if you're inclined to learn InDesign, if you can do basic infographics, do very basic video production or advanced work in Excel, it makes you a lot more useful in a lot of different projects that pop up in internships. So I might also look at adding those kind of skills that are kind of in demand day to day.
Also keep your resume to one page. Not front and back, just front.
Especially early on. One quick thing I would add is, you hear a lot of these be coachable and all these sort of things. It is simply true. A hiring manager is looking for energy, enthusiasm, and an excitedness about going to work. They can channel all of that in the direction that they want for the purpose of the organization, for the role that you're going to play. So you want to be energetic, you want to be enthusiastic, and be coachable, because you might come in doing this work, but then a job opening happens over here, but they say, I really want to bring this person on full time, right? And you create the opportunity for yourself.
Going into the medical field, do you guys have any pointers for pre-med students who are working with anti-life professors who say that life is not, as we've been learning today, from conception? Do you have any pointers in how to get involved and ways to stand out without failing a class by saying you're pro-life? I've had a few professors in the past that debunk it and say find a new professor. Are there paths that I can get involved now before medical school and all those ways, or is that another question?
And that's a great question. Medical Students for Life. I'm sure you might have heard and talked to Tina or others here with Students for Life. I'm sure they can speak more to that. But as to the question about your career, that's kind of the tactful questions are things that we all wrestle with in our careers, and how do we bring our pro-life values to bear on our occupations, where we're planted or where we want to grow. So that's not a definite answer, but definitely encourage you to continue to speak up.
And also, Students for Life has pro-life futures, so once you're beyond college, that's a good way of staying plugged into that community. That way you can have a support network of pro-lifers who you can kind of bounce these questions off of as you're going through that post-college.
Also, the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists, I had to look it up because I forgot what ACLOG stood for, is another really great organization. I think they have peer-reviewed journals. The Charlotte Lozier Institute also has a lot of really great data and statistics. You're probably not going to win your professors over. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't state your pro-life views and state them boldly, but there's a group outside of your classroom who is pro-life and is doing really good research, and be encouraged. I know it's really hard. I had a hard time in classes at Yale being pro-life and, yeah.
Yeah, I would simply add, from a very tactical standpoint, there's Students for Life Action, Heritage Foundation, and other organizations. You know, tell us who those professors are, because we're more than happy to shine a spotlight on them and demonstrate the damage that they're doing intellectually, and you know, everything else. And so, but I think that's important because, you know, you play a role not only in shaping your own career, you play the primary role in that, but they're shaping the debate on your campus, they're shaping the debate in that profession. And as we know, in a post-Roe world, this debate is going to go to every state, and it's important that we leave no heart untouched in our journey to convert them over to this. So somebody way in the back said this panel's much better looking with me back here, so I won't go back up on stage. I'll just say, if anybody has, or if each of you have, maybe if you were sitting out here and you were going to graduate in 3 months, what would be the one thing you would say, I'm going to do this to launch my pro-life career? And then we can wrap with that. And then you can send your resumes to Kyle, and you can corral Kyle up here and get on the Heritage Job Bank list. But Andrew, let's start with you. If you were sitting out here, you touched on this earlier, but you're gonna graduate in 3 months.
If I'm graduating in 3 months, I'm thinking, when's that Supreme Court ruling coming down? I want to get involved with my state. So for me, I'd be talking to my either state pro-life group or state that I'm in, or looking at the federal level and saying, how can I help influence policy? If your interests are similar to mine. And getting involved with the organizations that are there, finding out what needs are there and how you can fit in.
Great.
I'd say get online, research jobs, apply to a lot of things, even if you don't hear a single word back. And then once you get here, join a church, because even if you're going to be here for a short time, it's great to have a community of people who are like-minded and who can help you be spiritually healthy as well as successful in your career, because being successful in your career is not the most important thing.
Amen.
And lastly, all roads lead to Kyle Pennell.
Well, shamelessly, I'd say come talk to me. Let the Heritage Job Bank help you out. We'll be in the forum room until 5 o'clock, and you can also go to the Heritage Table in the exhibit hall, and they'll give you info on the job bank, how to get plugged in there. I would say, obviously, if you're 3 months out, apply for all the jobs. That's kind of right in the sweet spot of when people start looking at your application. But I also say be a little bit patient, especially in the policy world. These jobs don't always hire and magically appear right at graduation time. Most employers are too small to really hire as they meet good people or as they graduate. It's usually a matter of a need arising or someone leaving a job and then having to hire. Sometimes it happens in May, sometimes it happens in September. So if you don't have the job at graduation, be patient, the jobs will be there. There's a bit of a game of musical chairs aspect to it, but if you want to do this work, you stick with it and don't think it's not going to work out for you if it doesn't happen in May.
Yeah, the last thing I would say is, you know, Kyle is our point person on this, but at the Heritage Foundation, we have internships every semester, and at summertime, you know, there's 60 to 70 interns in there all at once. And so don't see it as this small window and the limited number of slots. See it as a great opportunity. And we're just one organization among many, and they're all growing, and that's a good thing. So thank you for being here, your commitment to life. Please thank our panelists and our friends.